Now today, this is going to be part 13 of our FZR restoration. It looks like the epoxy joint we made on the instruments yesterday, that worked out great. That's nice and rigid now and shouldn't crack anymore. I still want to make a bracket for this. This is kind of loose here. I'm not real happy with the way that moves around. Although it didn't break over all these years. And now that I've had some time to really think it through, well, we're just going to save this fairing. Well, maybe one of our friends can use it. But knowing we have the instruments stiffened up, we're not going to have to modify any of the brackets. We're only going to have to pull the paint off of that fairing and Bondo in the front. Now I was really hoping that was one of the steps I could avoid, even though I've made a list of things the way I want them to work out. Well, sometimes you don't get choice one. And it's always my personal feeling that you restore any old motorcycle, actually anything old, there's disappointments along the way. You have to change the plan, but in the end, it all works out great. And I kind of remind myself of all the disappointments I had with the body work from this and parts I had to do twice. But in the end, I've really enjoyed owning this bike for many years now. And the truth is, to me, these motorcycles become like children. Well, actually, for me, like grandchildren, in a way. And just like children, every one of them is a unique little entity that the part of motorcycling I enjoy is kind of riding a different bike every other day or so. So now the next step is to get down to shop and see how that glue that we put on yesterday dried up. So the glue has been drying overnight, and this is the Thixotropic West Systems resin. That's definitely dry. Now what I always do is, as soon as I know the glue is not going to drip, and Thixotropic glue doesn't typically drip at all, put it up by the heating vent. Of course, this time of year the heat goes on in an old house like this. It's on almost constantly. So that should be ready to sand. Now this is where it's going to be important today to sequence the job, because I'm working around a couple other things in the house that I'll go into later. Right now, see, there's a lot of things I could do. I could be sanding this all down, I could be doing other things, but I really wanted to sequence this for one reason. Let me explain. I put this tape on here so that the epoxy would not work its way out here, and this is all going to get filled in with, and let me explain, I'm trying to use the minimum amount of Bondo. Now normally, I'm sure if this was a bike flip, you just take the trowel and trowel it on. This would all be prone to cracking and breaking and everything. So I'm really trying to minimize that amount of Bondo. I also bought a brand new can of Bondo, so I'm not dealing with something that's 10 years old, even though I have old Bondo in stock. Now see, some of the epoxy, and that's exactly what I wanted to happen, is worked its way down in there, but I still want to fill this gap. I don't want to have Bondo in there, I want to have epoxy. So I'm going to pull the rest of the tape off and see if I can make that happen. Now this overage here I could just trim off with scissors, but always remember, anytime you're doing this kind of thing, everything that sticks out here is a razor blade, and you can really get one under your fingernail, ruin your whole day. That's all rough sanded in, and we put an extra coat of thick CA around here because we're going to want to dress that off reasonably nice. In here you're not going to see, not really important. Structure more than appearance. So it's time to take the towel outside, shake it out, get rid of all the dust we can. This is a dusty, dirty job, that's for sure. And we'll be ready to start filling in that headlight gap. So the next thing is I want to get down in these grooves. I've got some acetone on this. Get out any dirt or dust. I'll run a little piece of sandpaper down in there. And then I want to fill these grooves with epoxy, which I'm hoping is going to be a lot stronger than if I just put Bondo in there. again, we're going to find out. This is the kind of thing you find out pretty quickly. And by heating the epoxy with a hairdryer, as we do it, it'll allow the epoxy to go down in there a little bit more. Remember, heat always makes epoxy cure a lot quicker. It makes it thinner, so it gets a better capillary action also. So we're pretty much ready here. Just run some sandpaper in there. Jig this up in such a way, let's see how we can do this. I think it's right about like that. And just to get a piece, some roughness on this. Get whatever dirt is in there, wax, whatever. It's really, you can't make this up. This was the whole reason I ordered that other part, is I did not want to go through this Bondo thing, but I was willing to pay almost $200 to avoid doing a Bondo job up here, but in the end, I wound up with the Bondo job. So, I don't know, baby. Anyway, we'll rough this up. This is going to be a focal, this area is going to be a focal point of the motorcycle, and I really hope this works out the way I want. Okay, what I'm going to try to do here, mixed up some epoxy. See how this is going to work. I just want to trowel this in. I want it to fill in that gap as much as possible. I'll do one side at a time. I want as much of that gap to be epoxy as possible and as little to be Bondo. If you only knew how many really beautiful custom cars and custom things I've seen in my lifetime, and right after buffing it out and right after everything, there's a crack in it. You could cry. Makes you want to cry. So as long as we get enough of this down in there that's epoxy, I think we're going to be fine. And then the rest of it, the cosmetic stuff, why, there'll be a lot of sanding. That's for sure. Okay, now the idea is try to get it down into the gap if we can. And once one side dries, I'll do the other side. And that should, I hope, really minimize the Bondo. And then once we do the final sanding on this, and boy, that's going to be a lot of hours of sanding, because I really do want this whole part to look as good as I can make it. Now that epoxy is definitely have to dry overnight before we can go on. And the next step on this is going to be, I'm going to have to spend probably the better part of a day block sanding this all out. Now that epoxy, once it sits overnight by a heating vent, it'll be hard enough that it'll sand properly. If I try to do this afternoon or later today, it's gonna be chewing gum. It's just gonna make a mess of all the sandpaper. So, and hopefully I can get a day, even if I have to postpone this a day, that I can do this outside. And then once that's done and I can Bondo that in, the next thing is going to be to attach these two pieces, and of course remove all the old finish. It's labor intensive. This is the kind of thing, it just takes time. But then in the end, you can see the fender was in probably the same bad shape. In the end, it all comes together. So I hope you enjoyed the video, and again, thanks for watching.